Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone just 1 minute to join the session. And I would love to see where everyone is from. So please, in the chat section, let us know where you're tuning in from today. We've had some really awesome people from around the world. It's been great to see where everyone is in the world. So for this session today, please use the Slido, which I'm just about to paste in the chat section. If you could use, oh, hello from Sydney, hi from Byron Bay, awesome. Please use the Slido for your questions, not the Q&A function in Zoom. So I'm posting that in now. Another hi from Sydney. Awesome. Okay. Let's get started. So thank you for tuning in. Welcome to our second day of Liminal. I'm Danny, the head of community at Blackbird. Together with StartMate, we've produced Liminal to give you a snapshot into a career in startups and how you can get there, even though the path may not seem so obvious right now. So as you'll see with Sam today, her career path was not straightforward, and career paths often aren't straightforward. And if you're thinking about a career change, we really hope that these talks this week will inspire you. So Liminal is a taste of the StartMate Fellowship. It's a 2-month program that we're kicking off in late September, and it helps you land your dream job in a startup by building your knowledge and networks. So applications for the fellowship are now open. And if you'd like to know more about it, we actually have a AMA session running on Friday, which you can register through via the Liminal website. So before we quickly hand it over to Sam, just a few pieces of housekeeping. First is that the session will be recorded and available afterwards, so we'll send that out to everyone who's attended today. Again, please put those questions into Slido. We'll post this link again for you, not in the Q&A function. And we'd love for you to share the love on social. So tweet, post on LinkedIn, and help us spread the word about Liminal. So on to Sam. I'm so excited to introduce you to my colleague, Sam Wong, today. She's a partner at Blackbird, and she is helping fund ambitious ANZ founders who are building global businesses. She started her career as a corporate lawyer before joining a startup as an early employee. She then joined StartMate as a founder, and now she's an investor at Blackbird. I'm really excited for Sam's session today. She is going to share what it's like building your career in venture. So handing it over to Sam now. Thanks so much. We're going to leave about hopefully 10 minutes at the end for questions, and we'll try and get through them all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Danny, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to try and get through this as fast as possible because personally I find the Q&A the most interesting part. So let me try and get my presentation going. So the topic is building your career in venture. I'm going to try and summarize really quickly 18 years of working history and non-linear career paths, and hopefully you take something out of it. A little bit about me, as Danny alluded to, I've had 4 careers. I've been a lawyer, a product manager, a founder, and now I'm a partner at Blackbird. And hopefully, well, I certainly intend for this to be the last job I ever do. Potted history, I studied law and history at UNSW. I got a clerkship in my 4th year, I think it was, at Minter Ellison, which is sort of like a big city law firm in Sydney. And if you don't do a terrible job doing that, usually they offer you a grad role, which I accepted, and I became a corporate lawyer, basically because I just didn't know what else to do. After sort of 4 years, I knew that I had this entrepreneurial itch. I'd been doing things on the side, and before I had golden handcuffs fastened for good, I'd have to get out and try something different. I didn't really have a clue how to do that. Fellowship didn't exist, Liminal didn't exist. I blagged my way in, this is 2010, so 10 years ago. I blagged my way into a startup, surfstitch.com, as employee number 20. I was there for 3 years, had a great sort of startup MBA education there, I would say. And then after 3 years, I left to found my own company, which went through StartMate. I would say we ultimately pivoted and elegantly failed, but I learned a lot along the way about what it takes to build a great startup. And I was fortunate that, you know, between 2 startups, Nikki, Nikki Shabak, who's a co-founder of Blackbird and who then ran StartMate, suggested I might make a good hire, a good first hire for Blackbird. And so that's when I joined in 2015, and in 2018 I was promoted to partner. And just earlier this year, I moved to Auckland to head up our New Zealand fund in our New Zealand office, along with Tim Ponsonby. So that's the highlights. I guess, you know, how do you, what can you take out of sort of that 18-year journey? I'm going to try and distill it down for you. The number one and probably most important thing is like optimize for learning and not for money. In 2010, in the middle of the GFC, 6 months after buying my first apartment, which was like 45% of my salary, I was 28. I was really unhappy. I was like pathologically single, not in the dating lots way, just really single because all I did was work. I quit my job and I moved home with my mum, and I started working part-time for any startup that would have me. I even did one of those jobs was for free. One was like paid, which was the one at SurfStitch, and I just gave myself 1 year to replace my salary so that I could afford to hopefully move into my apartment one day, or at least out of my mum's. And that was my goal and my target. My first job at SurfStitch was a 3-week kind of casual gig doing SEO optimization, which I knew nothing about, and it paid $25 an hour. But that turned really quickly, as fast-growing startups often do, into an email marketing role, which turned into a product manager role for an Australian-based e-commerce role, a business they were building out with the Billabong Group, which then turned into, you know, I think 12 or 14 months in, moving to France and building a team to set up the European headquarters of SurfStitch, and spending two years there, where I met, fortunately, my life partner, Ben. But then, you know, and so that was an awesome ride. But after 3 years, again, I felt my learning plateau. And even though sort of I was reporting to the CEO and everything looked kind of great on paper, I felt, you know, personally a little bit dissatisfied, and I wanted to learn more. And so I quit and moved back to Australia and started a startup, and I paid myself $25K a year. I moved back in with my mum. Thanks, Mum. I promise I won't ever move in again. And you know, and again, it was for the learning, and I learned more in StartMate in those 3 months than I think at any other point in my career. And then between startups, you know, I joined Blackbird, and the money was definitely better than $25K a year, but it really wasn't that great, especially in the beginning. But I knew that surrounded by Nikki and Rick and the Blackbird portfolio, that I was going to learn more faster about what it takes to build a great startup than I could doing any other job, and that's why I accepted. And I've always figured that, and my philosophy has always been that if I can learn and be useful to people, the money will eventually follow. And I guess the lesson in all of this is, like, I would never have taken the Blackbird job without going through StartMate. I would never have started my own company if I hadn't joined SurfStitch at that time, and I wouldn't have joined SurfStitch if I just hadn't, you know, taken a risk and you know, quit my law job to go work minimum wage at a startup to get the experience I needed. Fortunately, you guys don't have to do that. You guys can do the fellowship, and I definitely recommend that route if it's open to you. So second learning would definitely be say yes to things you're unqualified to do. And this is really a big one for the women in the audience, because research shows that women are unlikely to put themselves forward for roles where they don't have 100% of all the bullet points in the JDs, and that's a, you know, separate discussion around whether JDs should be drafted that way. But just don't do it. The only job I've ever been qualified to do was law, and it didn't make me happy. It turns out that if you're really passionate and curious and hardworking, people will give you a go. My first startup jobs were in SEO, search engine marketing, email marketing, product management. I didn't know anything about any of those things, but that was kind of okay, because in 2010, no one outside of Silicon Valley really did know much about that. But, you know, through my, you know, I guess legal training or what have you, like, I could write, I could Google really well, I could research. I built a couple of side projects on the side, so I sort of knew how the web worked, and I kind of just pieced it all together. When I joined Blackbird, I didn't know anything about managing a VC fund. I'd never studied accounting or finance, as horrific as that sounds. But again, I was a lawyer. I was used to analyzing new problems and teaching myself things. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're the sort of person who has, taken time out of their lunch break to join a webinar like this, and I reckon you're the sort of person who has enough initiative and can afford to back themselves to learn anything. So don't self-sabotage and opt out of opportunities just because you don't have 100% of the skill set. Don't lie about what you don't have, but give the world the opportunity to give you a chance. And lesson number 3, more specifically to sort of how you start to build a career in venture as an investor, is the only thing, or like 90% of the job, is just building a honeypot for deal flow. And counterintuitively, that is not always about having money to invest. Venture is a really weird business in that there isn't really a corporate ladder for it. Like, it's very rare to start at the bottom as an analyst or an associate and work your way all the way up to partner. I mean, it can definitely happen, but it's atypical. The traditional tried and tested way is to be an ex-founder or a senior operator at a really successful startup. But again, that's a fairly limited group of people. Fortunately, we live in an age where opportunities are more open to you if you can be creative and hustle really hard. So I wanted to run through some examples of folks who I think have done this and who you could see yourself in potentially. So the first one, maybe a bunch of you listen to his podcast, is a guy called Harry Stebbings. He has a podcast called The 20-Minute VC. He actually also, I think, runs a SaaS podcast. And he started podcasting about VC, as the title would suggest, when he was 17, from an attic in his mum's house. At that point, I think there were it was a very uncompetitive space. There were very few other VC-focused startups, and he would interview VCs and angels for 20 minutes. He had a really bubbly, engaging style. As a 17-year-old in England, he knew nobody. But a couple of cold emails, and then at the end of every interview, asking the guest, who are the 3 other people I should speak to, led to a kind of wonderful sort of pyramid scheme. And now the guy has probably the best Rolodex in VC, or one of the best Rolodexes in VC. And I think what made it so successful was, as a learner himself, he had no pride or no self-consciousness about asking the stupid questions. And so very quickly he was able to gather a really engaged audience. I think it has 200,000 weekly subscribers and millions of listens. So, I mean, I think if Harry can do it, you can do it. And I guess off the back of that podcast, he got to know a bunch of people. Founders knew that he knew VCs, so they would email him asking for advice, or emailing their pitch deck along and asking him to pass it along. And before you know it, he had this pipeline of deal flow. He just didn't have money. But through the podcast, he met a bunch of other investors, and he actually teamed up with Fred Destin from Excel, and they founded a fund based in London. And actually just recently he announced he's launched a US focus micro VC fund as well. And the guy's 24. Here's another one, which is sort of around, proving out a thesis. If you don't have money to invest, can you create a proxy for what the portfolio would look like and perform if you had invested? So Sydney Page Thomas is a senior associate at a pre-seed stage firm called Precursor Ventures based in SF. She didn't have money, but she wanted to sort of show the cookie crumb trail of companies she would invest in if she could. So again, she started a podcast. She published her thesis. She talked about it really widely and interviewed pre-seed stage founders that fit within that thesis. And then she just tracked them over years. Unfortunately, this sort of stuff doesn't happen immediately, but 2 or 3 years later, she was able to go, okay, of those 15 odd companies that I featured on the podcast, who has gone on to raise a Series A? And what she demonstrated through that process is that she could find and pick winners and build a relationship. I guess, and you can actually put a number on that, right? Imagine if she was an investor at a fund and was able to write a check at X valuation that they were then raising at when they were on the podcast, and say you could get 10% ownership, 2-3 years on, what would that be worth? That is a track record. You just didn't do it with money. And I guess, if you are in a position to invest, anything, do it. And I actually think it is more meaningful in a way to convince a founder to take 2K. You would be surprised. I convinced founders to take 2K from me before I was a partner at Blackbird. Because the money obviously doesn't move the needle for them. It probably is like, what, 1 week of burn or something like that. But it shows alignment, it shows your belief, it makes you committed to the company to help them. And it shows like a lot of hustle to build and develop a relationship with founder, which is actually not related to money, which ultimately is a commodity. So I love that example around, talking about your thesis, building a honeypot of deal flow for it, and trying to build a proxy for financial results in a portfolio. And then I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to try and zip through it. I've got a couple more. So this one is just a community building approach. So Bree Kimmel is a friend, very similar to Harry. She sort of wanted to build a pipeline of deal flow in early stage SaaS, particularly sort of product-led bottom-up growth SaaS. So she started a SaaS school, and she went around to operators she knew and some she didn't, and asked for recommendations as well, and delivered an invite-only course where these operators from Airtable, Dropbox, etc., would deliver content over talks or office hours. And so it wasn't even necessarily her delivering all the wisdom. She just put herself in the center of the community and was a great connector between founders and this expertise. And so all the early stage founders would apply to be part of SaaS school. Obviously, again, giving her insight and giving her deal flow. She blogs relentlessly. She is so hardworking and hustles, always trying to be helpful where she can. And she's last year she raised a $5 million micro VC fund backed by Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, and the Zoom CEO Eric Yuan and others. And I think she's out raising a second fund now. And I've seen this like community building model work really effectively in lots of different areas. I mean, sort of hardware, synthetic biology, etc. I mean, I didn't sort of consciously do it, but when I first started investing in alternative protein in 2018, there was no community in Australia or New Zealand, and I really worked to try and tell the world my ideas about investing in that space, going to the relevant conference and building the network and connecting people across that network, so that if anyone was doing anything in alternative protein, I would hopefully hear about it. And that has largely proved out to be true. I mean, alternative protein is now a quarter of our third fund in terms of deal flow or in terms of investments. And so last but definitely not least, the be extraordinarily helpful strategy. A lot of you may know Rain, if not in person, then on Twitter. And he is just known as the person who works the hardest for founders. He will do the things that no one else has time or energy to do. And for the Propeller guys, this is him with the Propeller founders who went through StartMate in my batch. You know, their seed round was it wasn't really like a full-on party round, but like there wasn't like a strong lead who was like 3/4 of the round. I think if I'm not wrong, Rain cut the smallest check, rounding up a bunch of angels, but he did all the work. He helped them set the terms, review the docs, set up the data room, perform the due diligence, wrangled all the angels into line. And there are so many different ways that you can use your skill set to be helpful to founders. If you have a background in UI, UX, or product, put that to use. Basically, every early stage founder is doing like 3 to 4 jobs at least. They will happily give away one to someone who is genuinely useful. So just work out what is it that you can bring. Be honest with yourself about like your level of expertise, and be ready to kind of hear that, actually you're not the expert you thought you were, but like, that's easy to get feedback on that sort of thing. But I really think this is another opportunity to bring people from different backgrounds to help startups. So that is a wrap. I'm going to stop there, and we have 11 minutes for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the top voted question was, and you've kind of touched on this, most job descriptions list previous skills and experience required for a role. How do you put yourself forward for growth opportunities without having them all?
Yeah, this is a really good one. So I think that the best way of answering this is like teach yourself as much as you can online, and a lot of teaching is doing. So I'll just give an example. So like before I moved into startups, I did a whole bunch of side projects. Like I was co-editing an online-based media startup, I guess it was, with another lady who ended up going to Google. I built my own blog, and that doesn't sound extraordinary nowadays, but this is 2010 when you had to code it like from scratch. So what is the sort of, 2020 equivalent of the skills that you need to demonstrate? Can you do that yourself on your own steam?
What's your advice for helping young women especially deal with imposter syndrome when it comes to their career in startups?
I don't know if I have a really great answer for this. Imposter syndrome, it's a thing as long as you acknowledge it and stop, everybody has it. And once you sort of know that everybody has it, like that can be a secret weapon. I might try and share this later, but there is like an Obama quote. I don't know if you've heard, there's a blog like Humans of New York, and there's this Obama quote where he talks about how basically his like senator career really stank, and he was 40 and he was like, I'm failing, and maybe I've been going at this for a while, maybe it's not the the career path for me. And then he just realized like that if you always thinking about how you're performing, you're not focused on the work, and if you just focus on the work, you will always have a path. And I have that printed out and on my desk, and it's just a great reminder, like just take yourself out of, the perception, your perception of other people's perception that you can never know about, and just focus on the work that you enjoy doing. And that makes you, that fills you a sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah, it's a great answer. How would you recommend getting your first job in a startup when, especially the smaller startups, don't post on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So my advice is, do the work. You almost have to take like a growth marketing mindset to it in a way. Like, what are you interested in? What skill sets do you have? There's like a Venn diagram of those two things. Go search for the startups in that space. Most startups will have a profile on Crunchbase. They may have been written up somewhere like Startup Oz or something, but they may not have. You could lurk around co-workings or speak to accelerators. They tend to sort of know who's doing what, and pitch them. Just say, hey, this is what I can do. How about I start for free? How about I start for real cheap? And we can just try this on for size. And if they are growing, then usually that will turn into something. I just think it's like, do first, be useful, and then wait to harvest later. There's just a trailing element to it.
So this is a bit of a follow-on question. Does this same strategy apply if you're not a 20-year-old, but a midlife woman with a wealth of experience?
Well, I mean, I think I've seen people, later in their careers execute this, and it's a different proposition for sure. But, I think then you almost have advantages that younger people don't have. You have a network, you have people who can vouch for you. I would say just share, tell everyone what you want to do. Like I was like almost senior associate level at a law firm. Like I felt like I was pretty senior in my career, and I just told everyone what I wanted to do. And I wasn't too good to move home with my mom. And I'm not saying that's what this person is suggesting. I'm just saying I really humbled myself, but I didn't, I wasn't an artist about it. I was like, I've got a year to replace my salary. I've just got to move quickly, and I can start really low because I'm banking on the rate of acceleration to get me where I need to be 1 year from now.
Awesome. What did you see as your most transferable skills from your corporate career or previous roles?
In terms of skill, so I guess from law, obviously, I can make my way around deal docs. I think law actually teaches you a lot about sort of commercial nous, and how to sort of read a situation for different intentions and considerations. You get pretty good at researching stuff you have no idea about. especially like I was in M&A and then in litigation, you know, you could be working on a shareholder dispute with mining companies one day, and then, a property contract thing the next. And you actually, like, the problem is a legal one, but the client has a commercial problem, and you need to really understand like what is going on commercially in order to actually do your job properly. And so you get pretty good at like coming up to speed quickly with new information. But I don't know. I don't think I took that much, to be honest, out of my law career, or at least nothing essential. Like.
Awesome, thank you. I think we have some aspiring founders in this chat as well. So this question has come up a few times. What is the number one thing Blackbird looks at when investing in a company?
Oh, well, it's always founders, which is like, a cliche because it's true. And this one is really, really hard to sort of explain, but I guess the two sort of indicia that I really look for are, are they magnets for talent? To my point earlier around how do you get a job, it's like the best startups in my experience, like, are really greedy to hire people they can't yet afford, and they work out ingenious ways of convincing those people to join. So I really look for that in a founder. And the second is velocity of progress. Again, like, it doesn't matter that you start at zero. It matters how quickly you grow, and the grow may not be revenue. It may be, product execution. It may be, marketing execution. It could be lots of different things, but it's like, is the pace really fast? They're the sort of two things that I use to test, I suppose, whether I think this is a really high quality founder. And then obviously the third that Blackbird always looks for is this, like, life's workness. Are they in it to kind of make a quick buck, or is this something they would be working on even if they weren't being paid? Because that is the sort of level, I suppose, of dedication that startups often need, and it means the founder is equipped with unique insights into product and go to market that gives them an unfair advantage over time.
All right, Sam, I'm going to try and get one more question out of you. What do you enjoy most about working in VC, and what do you find most challenging?
Oh, I just love working with founders the most. And I love really early stage. So I love that raw, early beginning where you're like you've got all these different problems, and you've got all these, I think of them like puzzles, like, and I love also following the personal journey of founders. It's incredibly kind of rewarding. People think that like big things happen at a macro scale, but I'm a real believer that 1, 2, 3 people actually make a huge amount of impact, and it's awesome being a small part, very small part of that journey. So what was the second part of the question?
Oh, and what's the most challenging aspect for you?
Well, I mean, like, everyone says this, like, saying no is really hard. And sometimes you're not even saying no because you don't think they'll be successful. That's the really bizarre thing about it. Like, as a founder, and I definitely felt this myself, like, you think if you're good enough, the person on the other side will write you a check, but actually that person has a funnel that looks like this, and they can only make 2 to 3 investments a year. So sometimes it's a no simply because they just don't have passion for the problem that you've solved, or they just don't feel like they have the skill set, or they don't, lots of different reasons that are totally out of your control. And you hear a no and it feels like a personal rejection about you, but it's not. So that's really hard to deliver. Just like, you only have X number of hours in a week, seeing everything, staying on top of everything. You always feel like you're doing kind of like a half-assed job out of everything, really.
Well, you're definitely not. I can speak vouch for you there. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Sam. We really, really appreciate your advice and takeaways. Just a reminder that the fellowship applications are now open. So they'll be open for 2 weeks. And if you're interested in hearing more about it, please join us for that AMA session Friday at lunchtime. and you can register for that through the Liminal website. So we'll have Liminal running from Wednesday until Friday now, every morning at 8 a.m. until 9. So make sure you register for more sessions if you already haven't. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much to Sam Wong, who's partner at Blackbird, for taking this time to run us through her career and careering ventures.
Apply for fellowship. You won't regret it.
Definitely. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.